I don't know if it was a mermaid or if it was really a human. I just know that it was incredibly strange and terrifying. Honestly, I didn't believe in supernatural creatures until that day. I traveled frequently for work, so renting Airbnbs was part of my routine. During one of these trips, I chose a small beachfront house in a coastal town. The photos showed a picturesque place, a cozy little house with a view of the ocean and direct access to the beach. The host assured me that the area was quiet, perfect for relaxing after long days of meetings. It seemed like the ideal getaway. I arrived in the late afternoon, and the place was even more beautiful than in the photos. The house was simple but comfortable, and the sound of the waves in the background brought an immediate sense of peace. I unpacked, took a stroll along the beach, and prepared for a peaceful evening, watching the sunset from the living room window. Everything was perfect. However, as the night wore on, I began to feel an inexplicable discomfort. It wasn't the kind of feeling that comes from something tangible, but something deeper, like the air around me was shifting. I opened the windows to better hear the sound of the ocean, but instead of peace, I felt something strange. The silence between the waves seemed longer and oppressive. Around 2 in the morning, after tossing and turning in bed without being able to sleep, I decided to go out and walk along the beach. Maybe the fresh air and the sound of the waves would help me relax. The night was chilly, but the sky was clear, illuminated by the full moon reflecting on the water, creating an almost surreal landscape. I was walking slowly, letting the waves wet my feet, when I noticed something in the distance. A solitary figure standing at the edge of the water, facing away from me. At first, I didn't think much of it. It could just be someone else enjoying the night on the beach. But as I got closer, a sense of dread began to grow inside me. I stopped, feeling my heart race. That gleam in its eyes wasn't normal. It wasn't the reflection of light. It was something deeper, something that didn't seem human. The beach, once peaceful, now felt like a place from another world. The sound of the waves, which had always been comforting, faded into a distant backdrop, irrelevant in the presence of the unsettling figure before me. I was walking slowly, letting the waves wet my feet, when I noticed something in the distance. A solitary figure standing at the edge of the water, facing away from me. At first, I didn't think much of it. It could just be someone else enjoying the night on the beach. But as I got closer, a sense of dread began to grow inside me. I stopped, feeling my heart race. That gleam in its eyes wasn't normal. It wasn't the reflection of light. It was something deeper, something that didn't seem human. The beach, once peaceful, now felt like a place from another world. The sound of the waves, which had always been comforting, faded into a distant backdrop, irrelevant in the presence of the unsettling figure before me. The figure turned slowly, its eyes locked on mine, and that's when I realized the face was wrong. There was no expression, no recognizable human feature, just a darkness that surrounded it, as if the light around was being devoured by that void. I should have turned back then, but my feet were frozen in place, fear rooting me to the spot. Suddenly, the figure moved with a sudden, unnatural speed. Without warning, it dashed toward the water, its feet pounding against the wet sand in a rhythm that didn't belong to this world. Its glowing eyes never wavered from me as it sped towards the sea. I stood there, paralyzed, watching the surreal scene unfold. The figure vanished into the dark waves, swallowed by the ocean, as if dragged into the depths by the very darkness it carried. The sea grew still again, but the air around me felt frozen, as if time itself had paused. Slowly, the sound of the waves returned, but the feeling that something incomprehensible had just happened lingered. Without thinking, I turned and ran back to the house. Those glowing eyes still burned in my mind, and the sight of it vanishing into the dark waters has never left me. Since that night, the beach has never been the same for me. I spent the rest of the night sitting on the floor, with the lights on, waiting for dawn. I didn't look out the window again, too afraid of seeing that thing once more. When the sun finally rose, I packed my things and left. I've always preferred more unusual Airbnbs, places that offered something beyond the typical hotel environment. So when I found an old mansion turned guest house in a small countryside town, I didn't think twice. The photos showed a place full of personality, with antique furniture and quirky decor. The host mentioned that the house was filled with antiques, which made it even more appealing to me. I was eager for a unique experience. I arrived at the mansion late in the afternoon. The house, built in the 19th century, had an imposing facade with tall windows and a staircase leading to a heavy wooden door. The setting sun cast a golden glow on the stone walls, and I felt a strange excitement as I crossed the threshold of the house. The host greeted me with a warm smile and showed me around. The mansion was even more impressive inside: period furniture, heavy curtains, and, as promised, dozens of antiques scattered across every room. But what really caught my attention was a room at the back of the house, where dozens of old clocks covered the walls, all stopped at different times. "This is the clock room," the host said with a light laugh. "None of them work. I think it adds a certain charm to the place, don't you?" I laughed with him, trying not to show how uncomfortable I felt. There was something about that room that unsettled me. The clocks, though harmless, gave off an eerie feeling that I couldn't quite shake. But I brushed the sensation aside and headed to my room, which was on the second floor. The first night, everything was peaceful. I stayed in my room, enjoying the quiet and beauty of the mansion. The bed was comfortable, and the windows overlooked a well-kept garden. However, as I tried to fall asleep, I started hearing a peculiar sound. At first it was soft, almost imperceptible, a faint ticking. I turned on the light, confused. There were no clocks in my room, so where was that sound coming from? I got up and looked around, but the ticking seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. I thought I was imagining things, so I went back to bed, covering my head with the pillow. The next morning, the sound had disappeared. I convinced myself it must have been the wind, or perhaps the sound of an old pipe. I spent the day exploring the town, trying to forget the unease from the previous night. But that night, the sound returned. This time, it was louder. The same ticking, now rhythmic and steady. I sat up in bed, listening more closely, and noticed something even stranger. The sound seemed to be getting closer. I jumped up suddenly, my heart racing, and went to the door. I opened it slowly and peered down the hallway. Absolute silence, but the ticking continued as if it was climbing the stairs. I decided to follow the sound, my body trembling with nervousness. I went down the stairs, and the ticking intensified as I approached the clock room. The room was shrouded in dim light, with only the faint glow from the hallway partially illuminating the clocks on the walls. All of them were stopped, just as I had seen on the first day. But the sound didn't stop. It was as if one of the clocks was working, but none of the hands moved. The ticking seemed to echo, vibrating through the walls. As I tried to pinpoint the source, I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. That's when I saw it. In the corner of the room, one of the clocks began to spin on its own. Its hands, once still, started moving rapidly, spinning in circles without any logic or pattern. Soon, another clock did the same, and then another. Within seconds, all the clocks in the room were moving, the hands spinning uncontrollably, but the ticking sound remained at a constant rhythm, like a heartbeat. Suddenly, they all stopped. An absolute silence took over the room. I stood frozen, waiting for any other movement, any other sound, but nothing happened. My heart was pounding, and the only thing I could do was run back to my room. The next morning, I decided I couldn't stay another night. I packed my things quickly and left without speaking to the host. Before leaving, I took one last glance at the clock room. All of the clocks were stopped, as if nothing had happened. Since then, I've never been able to stay in a place with clocks. Every time I hear a ticking sound, no matter how faint, my mind drifts back to that night. I still wonder what made those clocks move, but something inside me tells me it's better if I never find out.